I don't know how to describe it other than like a demon type of sound.
But it's silhouetted, hulking, every bit of 5.5 feet wide, 13 to 14 foot tall, pitch black.
The one thing that ran through my mind when I had this encounter was I don't have a big enough gun.
Your host, two-time witness and field researcher for more than 40 years, William Jevning. Welcome to Creek Devil.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Q&A. David, what do we have today?
All right, this first one is from Zomi53, and their question is, when is there going to be an expedition to possibly get some good photos and videos of these boogers so as to bring the boogers out of the darkness and into the light?
First
well,
of all,
I can answer that. We're going. We are going to the field on the 20th. We're going to the field on the 25th up to Don's area, and that is exactly what we are up to.
It's not easy.
Nope. Who knows what we'll run into.
That's the area you were speaking of where they're having the problem with missing people, Will? Is that the same area that we were talking about?
No, actually, well, we're going up to the Navajo Reservation, but the area I was telling you about was Lane County, Oregon.
Yeah, right, okay.
All right, ready for the next one?
I'm ready.
All right, this one is from Larry Shirley Bell 9960, and their question is, I live in Utah and I live in the mountains, and I wonder if they are here in our mountains. We are only above 6,000 feet.
And the question is wondering if they're in that area?
Yeah, wondering if they are in their mountains or not. In Utah.
Probably. Oh, I'm sure, yes. Don, you could probably answer that.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They crisscross. They move a lot. They're in Utah, that's for sure. Different family group. Yep.
You know,
I
John
want to mention
Green
one thing,
said
too.
something interesting. I'm sorry, Will.
No, go ahead.
John Green mentioned something interesting about migrating or migration patterns. And you're a better one to talk on this than I am, but he was convinced there were no migration patterns among the animals. And I'm curious what you thought about. That's an odd thing for me to hear him say, you know?
Well, because, first of all, there was never any indication that there was any kind of migratory patterns. Now, migratory patterns means they're going to use the same route seasonally. I guess let me back up a little bit. I don't call them migratory routes. You know, in most areas, and it really depends on the area and the terrain, how the terrain's laid out. What they're going to do is something very similar to what gorillas do. Gorillas have their ranges, and within the ranges, they'll go to certain areas for feeding throughout a year. And it's not really a migratory route because it changes from year to year what they're doing. A migratory route for like herd animals who use the same area over and over again, same routes. So it's not really a migratory route. And I'll use southern Washington as an example, the area that I worked for 12 years, and they're studying this one particular group. They did observe a circular route that they would go annually. And you could be within a 30-day time frame of where they would generally be, but they would never use the same place twice. And gorillas kind of do the same thing. And what it does, it helps, you know, the food not get depleted in an area. And with these things, typically they're in that area for about 15 days, roughly. Just enough time for the game to kind of get wise to their presence, and then they'll bolt from the area. So, and when they come in, they'll come into that general region the next year, they'll go to different places. So they change areas every year. And Green, I don't think really understood that at the time, but the fact that there was no regular pattern is what he was referring to. And they don't have a regular pattern, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Silence.
Oh, yeah.
No.
So I want
on the reservation, they move a lot. Go ahead.
The wheels are turning there.
Everybody's taking
it's they move in kind of. Go ahead, Alan.
I mean, it makes sense because I never understood why Green would make a statement like that.
Right.
You know, that's a bold statement.
It is,
and
especially for that time period.
Yeah, and I never really accepted it. I thought, how do you know that? How can you possibly know that that's not not occurring, even on somewhat a limited amount?
Well, you could take sightings, and this is how I figured out what they were doing in that area at that time. You can take sightings and you can plot them on a map, and you can do overlays of times, like the time of year and all that, and you can look to see if there are patterns. So him and DeHinden were doing similar things, but with all the reports they had, they couldn't establish any sort of patterns. What I did was listen to the locals, and the locals would say, well, you know, this year there was something over in this area, and then however many miles away the next year, you might get a report in that area. And what it appeared to me was, and this was after studying what gorillas did. I thought, yeah, they're not migrating. They're coming through. They have kind of a general route that they would follow. And you could call that a migratory pattern or not, but they could also change it the next year and do something completely different. But they would revisit certain areas on a general schedule. Now, in that area, they don't do that anymore. The pattern is completely different there now. But at that time, for those 12 years, they were following kind of a general area, and they would go to an area, and in one year they'd be in one spot. They might be 5 miles away the next year, the year following that. You could be in the general area, and within a 30-day time frame, if you were really on top of it, you could find out from local reports where things were, where the creatures were. And it was always the same group, but it was never a consistent migratory route. So you had to kind of think in terms of this sort of a loose behavior they were doing. And you could get close. You could get within, like I said, within a 30-day time frame of where generally they were going to be. But that area might be, 20, 30 miles across. So you couldn't pinpoint it like you would migratory animals.
Very good. Thank you.
So what I wanted to mention first before we go to the next question, David, is Lieutenant Pete Maverick mentions frequently on YouTube, always asking for Chris in Tennessee. So I wanted to address that. Yeah. Chris passed away last March, just before Tom did. So, Pete, he's not here anymore.
Yeah, he's left us.
He's left us. So you don't need to ask the question again. I know people have responded in the comments, but that one's for you specifically.
All right.
Okay, David. What do we have next?
Next one is from David Reagan, 9872. And his question is, hey, Will, what campground were you at when you heard screams at Lake Quinault?
It wasn't at Lake Quinault. When you come off Highway 101, you go 13 miles upstream to Graves Creek Campground. And right up in that area, the river divides. There's a North Fork. We were on the North Fork. And the campground, or not a campground, there's a campground at Graves Creek. On the other side, there were 7 kind of improved sites, but those are all gone now. The river washed them out.
All
My
right.
brother-in-law keeps tabs on that area for me, so.
Cool. All right. This next one is from Stacy Mitchell, 518. And their question is, I'd like to know your views on why Sasquatch seem to be more aggressive in the Oregon area.
I don't know. Maybe Oregonians don't taste as good. I don't know. Just kidding. I like people from Oregon, but I don't like Portland. I will say that. Portland's not the greatest place it used to be. It used to be a nice area, but I don't know.
Apocalypse there.
For some reason, they're pretty aggressive in that. Not all of Oregon, but that southern Oregon area.
I guess maybe it's because of that local environment, the area they're in.
Yeah, but it may be. I mean, and I think a lot of the back in from the late 50s to the time Patterson got his film in 67, I think based on what John Green wrote, it appears, and even they believe that the Sasquatches weren't native to that area. They were coming from the north. They were coming from Oregon down through that area. And Bluff Creek was never the focal point of all that. It's where the people were able to go to because that's where the roads were. But the creatures were coming from the northwest, coming down to the southeast in that area. So they'd only come through that area once every couple of years.
Well, they are.
But as far as behavior,
they are very territorial, and a lot of people like to go hiking and hunting in that area. So, I mean, that may be one reason for it, trying to get them out.
It could be. Yeah, I don't really know. Anybody have any ideas about that?
Anybody?
No, but wasn't there also an area up? So the ones up north in Alaska are pretty hostile too, right? There's some stories I've heard of Port Chatham area where they were aggressive and attacking people and dismembering. Maybe it's just that they don't fear man up there because people aren't going into the woods, as much, and maybe people aren't hunting as much, and they just lose their fear of people.
That's part of it. The fewer people, the more aggressive they seem to be in areas. You get in those real remote areas, they seem to be very aggressive. Could be territorial. It's really hard saying. Little experience with humans. Our friend Fred in Alaska, he's supposed to be joining us on the show, but he's been kind of tied up. So we have to catch Fred when we can. But he talks about how aggressive the creatures are up there, but also Montana. Montana and Alaska seem to be the top areas for aggression and size. They're bigger in those areas than other places.
Oh, yeah.
But Oregon, Southern Oregon is, it's right up there too. Like I said, Lane County, I believe it was 2 years ago, Tom did some digging and got the numbers. I think Lane County for 1 year had 156 missing people, just vanished.
Wow. Yeah.
That's incredible.
They're not all Bigfoot, obviously, but there's going to be a portion of them that are. And he was able to get some pretty strange 911 calls from that county. So, for instance, one of them was, and if you know that area, you have to go a long ways. People, I can't remember, I think they were hunters, way up in there just outside the Three Sisters Wilderness. And they had to travel a long way to get to a phone to call 911 to report these weird screams in the middle of the night. So you have to wonder, at 2 a.m., what kind of screams are that important? They have to drive, maybe 20 miles out to call 911 about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
David, what do we have up next?
You had mentioned earlier about teams.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to talk about that now, or?
Actually, I'm going to hold off on that, I think, for this time.
Rats.
All right.
David, what do we got up next?
This next one is from Donald Fuller, 5041. Donald says, "Hey, Will, do you think the ones in the Northeast are more aggressive due to the fact that they deal with more humans?"
I'm not that familiar about the Northeast. I know people, different researchers in that part of the country. In the Adirondacks, the natives up there talk about, just like you done, talk about how aggressive they are there and they're man-eaters and all that. I don't know about the stories coming out of the Northeast. I think they're probably more aggressive. It's just hard to tell. I mean, I'm trying to think. I hear things from different parts of the country, And it's kind of similar. You hear stories where they're not as aggressive, then you hear these really aggressive accounts. So I don't know if it's necessarily one region over another. I think it depends on the disposition of the creatures, the circumstances of the situation. It's just hard telling. I don't know at this point if there's any one area that's more aggressive than another.
Agreed.
You guys have any opinions on that or ideas?
I mean, food supply could always be a factor. You know, if the food supply is running thin in the Northeast, maybe there's, they're not getting as much food supply a certain time of year. Maybe they become more aggressive towards people. I mean, probably.
And it could depend on.
Are we
could
saying
depend on the
Northeast
variation
or
in the
Northwest?
creatures too.
Yeah.
Northeast.
Yeah.
Okay. I have. I mean, to me, the most aggressive seem to come out of Alaska right now. You know, it's sort of a Timothy Treadwell thing almost.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Who was a real special case. And, you know, you've got, I can't remember, his name escapes me right now. You mentioned it a while ago, but the guy that's up there doing just a tremendous amount of research right now.
Fred in Alaska,
yeah. Fred's really doing good work up there. And
he does.
Shows
He's
are very good. But I don't.
You know, I tend to think what happens too is, you know, we might be getting more accounts from witnesses from one area than another. It might be the same stuff going on in other places. We're just not hearing about it as much.
Interesting.
That's a good point.
Yeah, very good point.
All right, David, what do we have up next?
All right, this next one is from Guitar Lessons Bobby Crispy. I went camping on Meacham Lake in the Adirondacks. Any reported Bigfoot sightings in that area?
Yeah, I haven't been in touch with anybody in that area for a while since Jeremiah left the show, but he was collecting quite a bit of stuff from that area.
Yeah, he told me of at least, I think 2 or 3 family groups known to be in that general area.
Yeah, the local natives talk about it quite a bit too, the Mohawks there. But yeah, I've got a number of reports he sent me of stuff that he talked to people about. So there were quite a few reports in that region.
All right. This next one is from Richard Hall, 6762. And he says, I have a question about the horrible sticky stench associated with Sasquatch. Do you think they have anal scent glands? I've had one stalk me and a buddy high up on the backside of Mount Shasta and growl at us while some extremely strange vocalizations were happening further up. Yet, didn't smell anything out of the ordinary.
Well, I don't think they're anal scent glands. In other primates, they have in their arms or pits, they have scent glands. And the thing with these guys, just like other primates, I don't think you're not going to get a smell from them unless they get real excited about something. I've been 15 feet away from 2 of them, didn't smell a thing. In fact, of all the years I've been involved in this, I've only been in one situation where I got a call. There was a report. This was in Skamania County. A friend of mine and I drove out there immediately. It was raining. We parked the truck and we walked up this road where this sighting happened. And we were there within the hour after the sighting happened. And we walked into a wall of stink, and I can't even begin to describe it. I've never smelled anything that I could compare it to, but it made us both retch. I mean, we had to actually run down the road out of the stink. It was that bad. And I remember telling my buddy Jack, I said, now I got to test this. If there's something live here, we got to find out. So I went walking back, and by the time I got back to that spot, and we only ran maybe 60 or 100 feet out of the smell. When we got back to that location, immediately turning around and going back to it, the smell was completely gone. and we never saw or heard anything, but I started doing a little search of the area and found a spot next to the tree line. Just inside the tree line, there was a area of real thick moss, and the moss was all flattened down there. It had been freshly done. So something was there that had flattened the moss down and apparently caused this odor. So while I didn't have any direct evidence pointing the finger at what it was, it just kind of made me think, well, there was a sighting here within the hour, and we had this horrible smell, and then it was gone moments later, and we found this flattened area. So a little bit of circumstantial stuff. I mean, it's kind of a reach, to stitch the situation together, but I don't know what else it could have been.
In my experience, you only get that smell, like you were saying, because if they get really excited or if they're really upset about something or trying to get you to back out of their territory.
Yeah, I think we probably upset it, and I think that's, when I encountered the two creatures when I was 16, I think they saw me coming in there. I didn't see them, but they saw me. So they weren't real excited about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They never acted excited about anything. Even when I shot in the air, they could have cared. It seemed like they could have cared less. They were just the first individual was just watching me very intently. I shot in the air, it didn't move. It's just maintained its position. Then the other one come walking around, and I didn't wait around to see what their plan was. My plan was just to get the heck out of there. So that's what I did. But never a smell. In fact, John Green told me out of all the reports, he said, see the smell and like red eye shine and stuff like that. Those are things that the media reporters picked up on. They always got to have particular things for a subject.
Yeah.
That's the points they always hit on. A lot of those things are never accurate. The smell thing was, what did Green tell me? It was maybe one time out of 7 reports they might have somebody said they smelled something. It may have been a higher number than that. And as far as the red eye shine, there were only 4 reports out of 1,500 that Green had in his reports where somebody said that. Eye shine was usually amber, which is what I've seen several times.
Anytime I've ever heard anything about smell, it was maybe 2 or 3 out of 10 times. That's it.
Yeah, it's actually very few. It's not one of those. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, no, I was just going to say, too, I wonder how much of it has to do with where they were, living, or what kind of, were they subterranean in a mine shaft and they got a sulfur smell that they picked up from where they were nesting down, or, did they just come out of a big stinky creek that's full of, mud and that might be from the scent, or perhaps they had a fresh kill and they're smelling like a dead animal.
That can be part of it. This is usually a smell they produce.
Yeah, I've interviewed people in all kinds of circumstances, and if that were the case, you'd have a track record of things like that. But it's not the case.
Yeah.
The smell seems to be more of a scent gland type of thing.
I came into the smell after running after one. That smell was pretty ungodly. For the longest time, I thought we encountered a witch doctor, but after listening to this podcast, I realized that it was Sasquatch. But the smell I smelled was, oh man, it smelled like body odor, feces, blood. Oh man, it made me stop in my tracks. Me and my cousin and I, we started running towards it and went up a very, very steep hill. But all the witnesses on the Navajo Nation, they all report that smell as well. And a lot of times we know the smell, the difference between a skinwalker and a Sasquatch. We're starting to separate them still to this day.
I'll tell you what, if I were being chased by one, I know the source of that smell would have been.
Yeah.
running down one with it, huh?
All right, ready? Think we got time for one more, cuz?
Yep, we got 5 minutes yet.
Okay, this one is from Return of the Mac 8179. And they said, one night about 2:30 a.m., I was sitting across from a McDonald's that had closed. I heard what sounded like a dinosaur roaring or screaming. It kind of sounded like the way screeching metal on metal might sound like. It lasted perhaps 3 seconds or so. I was a bit unnerved. I was just wondering if that type of noise has ever been described by anyone who has witnessed Bigfoot activity before.
Well, John, how does that compare with what you heard?
Definitely not a screeching metal sound, or anything like that. More of a really in tune, high pitched, like I say, operatic. It was like a high quality vocal production, but not like a metal sound. I'm not sure what that would be. If you think about the mechanics of a voice, I suppose, I can't really come up with a mechanism where something that's biological could make a metallic sound like that. But, I guess I'd have to hear the sound to know for sure. But the ones that I've heard, they've been very high quality production sounds. I mean, really powerful, strong vocal sounds.
What comes to mind, there's two things. First of all, it depends on how the person is communicating that what they heard, what kind of wording they're using. What's in their frame of reference to put on that to try to describe to other people. The other one is, and the story is way back when I first moved to Vancouver, Washington, we were up looking for tracks one time in the snow. We'd been finding them a number of times going up to where the snow line was this is up near the border of Clark and Skamania County. So we were up there one time, my girlfriend and a couple of friends, and her kids were walking up this road to where we'd been finding the tracks. And I heard this noise, and it sounded just like that description, like metal screeching or tearing. And I hadn't been out of the Army very long, so I was still kind of in drill sergeant mode when I went running back to the car thinking somebody was breaking in the car. And I see a pickup there, and there was no markings on the truck, and there were two guys. One was out standing next to my car, the other one was behind the wheel of the truck. So I proceed to go up one side and down the other of this guy, and then I happen to glance over while I'm in the middle of this tirade and see the uniform on the other guy and his badge, but I thought, you know what, I'm already in the middle of it. I'm going to look like an idiot if I just backtrack now. So I finished with him. Then I went over to the guy in uniform and started chewing on him. and apparently it was a bullhorn one of the guys had that was making that sound, and it sounded like metal tearing from where we were. Not saying that maybe, whatever these people heard was a bullhorn, but the sound is weird when you're out in the woods. But those two guys were game wardens, and they got to be my friends after that, so
Yeah.
But I had to chew their backside, so thinking they were breaking in my car.
Well, now, cause you remember back in 2021, Chris from Tennessee sent us some audio of, Sasquatch screaming that sounded kind of like that as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
From the, Cherokee National Forest.
Well, Will, what you said to me the other day that was so interesting was that you had been informed by someone who had done an autopsy on one that they had two sets of vocal cords. And, we talked about it and, every animal, particularly humans, we have a true set of vocal cords and then we have a false set of vocal cords that sits on top, but they're not very powerful. But I went ahead and started looking around to see if there were any animals that actually were documented as having two sets of vocal cords. It turns out that Madagascar lemurs apparently do have two actual real sets of vocal cords that sit in series, one on top of the other. And I haven't heard their sounds, but apparently they are able to make some really odd sounds, and they can sound much bigger than they are, and they can make some really weird sounds because they have the double sets of vocal cords. So it's possible. I mean, they can make some really unusual sounds because of that. I've never personally heard that, but it does exist in nature, so.
What's interesting about that, you mentioned lemurs, kind of referring back to my old anthropology professor. He talked about how when we were getting ready to talk about primates, that lemurs, while they're not a true primate, they're kind of the forerunner of primates. So I have to wonder, if there weren't extinct species or unknown species, in our case, that are older. And I think the Sasquatch is an older species than humans. That maybe they had some of those features.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite possible.
I've always thought the lemur was the prime suspect on Sasquatch.
It could be. I know Gibbons, some of the early people like John Napier, who was an anthropologist. Yeah, or John Napier was an anthropologist from England, and that was he suspected that they were related to Gibbons.
That is probably where I got it from, because I read that in the 3rd grade and didn't have any idea what I was reading, but that's a hard book to read, by the way. If you,
It is. You got to have a little background, I think, in anthropology to understand some of what he's talking about. But he did.
Being a 3rd grader, I had none.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't have that as a 3rd grader. Well, guys, we're about out of time. Anything final before we wrap up the Q&A?
I've got that audio if you want me to play it real quick so they can see what it sounds like from Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Actually, that one I think wasn't his recording. That was another. But go ahead and play it.
Okay. That's it.
Actually, that I don't believe that was from Chris. I think that was something Tom had recorded.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, the thing was interesting about that is it sounds like a bird, but then you hear the gurgling noise almost. I believe there's more to that. I have to look at my files and see if I can find more of that recording, but
I've got the other one. It's definitely from Chris right after that one if you want to hear that one.
Yeah, you can play that one.
It's about 2.5 minutes, but I'll stop it if I need to about halfway through.
And I think that one actually wasn't from Chris. It was from earlier on the West Coast. But go ahead and play it.
Okay, here we go. Okay, that was about a minute of it.
That's about
that one's actually
sound.
That's been used on documentaries and that's been used in documentaries and TV shows.
Wow.
I can't remember exactly where it's from.
Yeah, I'm trying to put my finger on it, but something that's almost like a trumpet. It sounds almost like a trumpet sound. Something that, would have a shorter neck and a wider throat. That's a really interesting sound.
What I heard was a screaming woman.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. Is when it was piercing. Like I was telling Will, my mother was an opera singer, and I heard her every day singing the highest notes a human being can sing. And what I heard was, much higher pitched than that, and it was loud. It filled the night sky up, and it was just held out for 45 seconds, 30, 45 seconds. Huge lung capacity. So, yeah, that's like what I heard too.
Well, John, that's what happens when you throw eggs at him.
He
told you about that, huh?
Oh,
yeah.
Alan's not privy to that one yet.
My son is an opera singer.
Oh, really? What voice type?
Tenor, and he's at.
That's what I am too. Yeah.
He's finishing up at Tech right now. My airborne ranger tutoring didn't work, so he became an opera singer.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to study because, you have to learn about the fine-tuning mechanics of the voice and how to shape your vocals, your throat, your soft palate.
He is better at that than anything I am. I mean, he can nail it. Just one after another,
Alan,
he can just nail it. It's amazing.
Well, I can tell you're a tenor, Alan.
Alan, I can't imagine how that training didn't work.
I tried. I tried.
Now, you can tell by people's speaking voices. I can tell you're a tenor.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you, I guess.
You passed your DNA on to him. Will's a deep bass, though. Like, Will's more close to what like the deepest male voice could be. That he's got that resounding bass baritone voice.
Oh,
you and I are tenors. Yeah,
absolutely.
Make a band.
So, Will, are you going to tell us about the shootings?
Let me stop here. We're going to just hang on a second, fellows. Everybody, thanks for joining us, and keep sending questions into the comments.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creek Devil. If you or anyone you know has had an encounter with these creatures, please contact us at williamjevning@yahoo.com. That's William, Jevning @yahoo.com. All communication is confidential. Join us for another program next week. And until then, keep your eyes open out there.